Welcome everyone. I am Councillor Claire Udy, Chair of the Licensing Committee. Please be assured that we have put appropriate cleansing and social distancing measures in place to ensure that this meeting is undertaken in a COVID-secure manner. This has included a request for all attendees to have taken an LFT test, says LFT here, within 48 hours of the meeting. The use of the NHS track and trace app or attendees log, 2 metre social distancing, the wearing of masks when not seated, a one-way system in the Guildhall and a temperature check upon arrival. Limited public seating has been made available. However, this meeting is also being webcast to allow members of the public to attend remotely if they so wish. Please be advised that public seating area is not in view of the camera used to webcast this meeting. Can I ask members to remain seated at 2 metres throughout the duration of this meeting and wear a face covering unless seated? Deputations, which they are none, as far as I'm aware. Housekeeping, safety information. If the continuous fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room and public gallery by the stairwells. Please do not attempt to use the lifts. Please assemble at the Queen Victoria statue in front of the civic offices. In order to comply to the Guildhall Trust Fire Marshal regulations, anyone signed in at the Guildhall reception desk should sign out when leaving the building at the end of today's meeting. Live web streaming. May I draw everyone's attention to the fact that this meeting will be live streamed. Everyone speaking via a microphone will be on camera, including those making deputations. Members of the press and public are also permitted to record the meeting on the understanding that it neither disrupts the meeting nor records those stating explicitly that they do not wish to be recorded. Please can everyone use the microphones and remember to switch them off when they have finished. Introductions from around the table. So I am Councillor Claire Udy and I am Chair of this committee.
Councillor Scott Pate-Harris, I am the Vice Chair of this committee.
Thank you.
Councillor Daniel Weems, Hilsey Ward Councillor.
Councillor E. Mason, Caution Ward Councillor.
Councillor Benedict Swan, Copner Ward Councillor.
Councillor Robert New, also Copner Councillor.
Councillor Darren Sanders, Baffins Councillor, deputising for Kimberley Barrett.
Councillor Stuart Brown, Fratton Ward Councillor.
Councillor George Madgwick from Paulsgrove.
Hayley Trower, Air Quality Improvement Manager.
Nikki Humphreys, Licensing Manager.
Anna Martin, Democratic Services.
Thank you very much. Apologies for absence. I have currently Councillor Dave Ashmore, Councillor Kimberley Barrett, Councillor Tom Coles, Councillor Jason Fasakali, Councillor Charlotte Gerarda, Councillor Ian Holder. Is there any other apologies for absence? Not at this current moment. Thank you very much. Any declarations of members' interests?
Chair, it's not an interest, but I think following the events of this afternoon with Sir David Amos and his tragic death, I think it would be good to have a moment of silence to reflect on that in this chamber.
Indeed, I only very briefly read about it over Twitter, but it's awful what has happened today, and I'm happy to have a minute's silence for that. I'll put a timer on my phone.
Thank you, Chair, I appreciate that.
If I can find it. Okay, 1 minute silence, thank you. Thank you, councillors. Let it be on the minutes that the licensing committee send their deepest condolences at this time. Please could we go through the minutes of the previous meeting, which was held on Friday, December the 18th, 2020, which was a virtual meeting. Page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, and 5. Is that okay with members in the room today? Thank you. Would you like a second? Thank you very much.
Seconded, Chair.
I will sign the minutes away. Agenda item number 4, electric vehicle charging points, which is pages 19 to 24 on your agenda. The purpose of this meeting is to brief members of the licensing committee on the arrangements for electric vehicle charging points so far as they relate to be used by licensed hackney carriages and private hire vehicles. This report was originally marked on the agenda to follow, but it has been published on the 8th of October, and I'd like to hand over now to Ms. Trower. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, councillors, for joining us on Friday afternoon. This paper is just really to provide you all with a bit of an update on where we are with the electric vehicle charging point project. So you might remember last year, it seems longer ago than that, but it was only last year, we brought a paper to look at the licensing requirements, particularly to have a think about encouraging more low emission and zero emission vehicles into the city. You might remember at the time we were trying to get some funding from central government to install some rapid electric vehicle charging points in the city for use of the taxi and private hire trade. I'm pleased to let you know that as a result of this committee's changing the licensing requirements and requiring zero emission capable vehicles by 2025, we have been successful in securing funding to install those rapid charging points. So rapid vehicle charging points will charge an electric vehicle that's empty to fully charged in about an hour, and will provide a quick top up for those who are in between jobs or in between work, basically, for the trade. The charge points are really large. They're not the ones we've already got in the city, so you might have seen the ones we've put in lamp columns and in bollards around the city. These are not the same thing. They're really big bits of kit that can, because they draw a lot of power and can charge vehicles really quickly. So that's the kind of thing we're looking at doing. The funding we've got, just shy of £500,000, will be enough to, we think, install around 10 charging points. We are proposing to install the charging points in hubs. So what that means is to install maybe 3 in one location, so that if a driver turns up and somebody else is already using a charging point, they can plug into another one and they've not had a wasted trip. So what we've done is we have appointed a contractor to install the charging points for us. A company called Joju was selected. They have done work across Hampshire. They've put charge points in Eastleigh and Winchester, so you can go and have a look at those if you're interested. So Joju are in post now to install them. They've started doing some feasibility work on locations. The locations put forward you can find at Appendix A. They have been suggested by members of the taxi and private hire trade in Portsmouth. Our engagement officer, Erica, has done a lot of work talking to the trade about where they think they might like charging points, and a survey was sent out as well, and that went through the trade reps as well. Appendix A contains the locations. I've also written it out in a table if that's easier, with actual street names kind of thing, if anyone would like that. Those are the suggestions. And as I said, we're looking probably for around 4, maybe 3, maybe 4 locations, putting them together in hubs to serve mostly the taxi and private hire trade. So today, really, it's just basically that, to give you an update of the fact that we have appointed a supplier. We're hoping to install them as soon as possible. We've consulted with the trade about locations, and to seek views from you as a committee today if there are any considerations you think we need to take into account in citing the charging points. And your thoughts on it, really. So I will hand it over to the floor. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll open it up to questions. I'm going to do by hands. It's a lot easier. Councillor Mason.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm just really asking, you say we've got the funding probably for 3 or 4 sites. Which are the 3 or 4 sites on the map you think we're going to probably get?
That's a really good question. So as it says in the report, the sites, probably we can't go exactly where the pins are on the map because we're constrained by things such as the power supply for the national grid and the location, the available locations. So what we will probably do is go for PCC-owned car parks because that's a bit easier to get them in quickly. If we put them on the highway, then we have to get licenses, we have to get traffic regulations or orders. And as I said, they're massive bits of kit, so they'll take up the footway. So which 4 locations? I think the ones we're looking at the moment are we're trying to have a spread across the city. So I expect the Park and Ride is up there, something in Southsea. I would like to see something off island as well to the north of the city. So any suggestions about PCC-owned car parks in particular, happy to take those on board.
Thank you. Is there a follow-up to that, Councillor Mason?
Just sort of half question, half comment. I'd like to echo that I think there really does need to be one off the island. I know for toilets we're very constrained off the island. Wootton Street gets a hell of a lot of visitation from people because it's the only public toilet service in Cosham and Portsmouth. There is a car park in Wootton Street though, which is City Council owned, though I think there's a likelihood of being redeveloped in 4 or 5 years' time, but I think technology will probably have changed and it could be included in reprovision because I think that might be a good location to go for.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mason. Question? Councillor Harris.
I think Councillor Mason makes a good point regarding the charging point off island. I think there does need to be something near the hospital, for example, for people being picked up and dropped off. I think it's quite fundamentally important that we do that. I've got the list, it's quite an extensive list. I don't want this to become Southsea centric, and I think that's quite important, that we shouldn't be just putting these charging points down there. It should be for everyone in the city to ensure that the drivers can charge where they would like. It's a bit of a different sort of slant I'm going to go on this one here, and it's more about the cost charge to use these chargers. How much is it going to cost pence per mile?
I can't tell you pence per mile, but I can tell you per kilowatt hour if that's okay.
That's perfect, yeah.
Great, thank you. The price hasn't been set yet. We've got a bit of negotiation to do with the supplier, but what we will aim to do is make the cost per kilowatt hour competitive with other charge points in the city. So we've already got rapid chargers at the port. They cost 40 pence per kilowatt hour. At Morrison's, it's 42 pence, and at Whitelink, it's between 35 and 43 pence per kilowatt hour. So I would expect somewhere in the 40 pence region.
40 pence per kilowatt hour is about 12p per mile, and I think it's about 42 is about 15p per mile, which is interesting because this is, I think, where the crux comes down to trying to get us into electric vehicles and to ensure that the trade get on board, because if they were to go and fill up their car with diesel, they're paying about 15p per mile, and they haven't got the rigmarole of having to actually go and charge their car for a certain amount of time and then being off the track, whereas obviously where they are at the moment, obviously doing that with the diesel price, but at the same time, is it cost effective for them in the longer term? And I think that's the question that needs to be had. So I do think we need to be ensuring that we're getting more competitive. We can get less than 40 pence, I think that would be better, but I think you should be striving for the best deal because, I only got those figures because a driver actually did the work and told me, which tells you how knowledgeable our drivers are. They are looking at the cost all the time. So I think it's important that I don't want to say we're pushing back on you, because I don't think that's right, but we want to make sure that we're getting the best deal for the licensed the licensed trade.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and I think it's important to remember as well, these are just one offer in the charging network, so these are fast chargers, so the cost is more per kilowatt hour. We have already got the network of the slower chargers around the city, so this we envisage this as more just as a top up while you're out on jobs and things, so I wouldn't expect drivers to be doing their full charge on these charge points.
I think if I put it in a bit of context like this, you can buy a Skoda vehicle for £15,000 and they would get a probably good run out of it in terms of a diesel vehicle. Or they could go and buy a Nissan Leaf with a bigger battery, which would cost them £35,000. So can you see the difference in the purchase price for the driver? And that is what it comes down to. I think we have to look at that as well. So I think all decent-sized electrical vehicles are going to have a price tag of between probably £30,000 and £35,000, and this is where the drivers have to make those decisions for their livelihoods. So if we can be more competitive on that front and make it more incentivised, because I think if we don't do that, they're not going to get on board, and we're going to have an issue where drivers are going to sit there and say, do I really want to switch to an electric vehicle, which is not really an argument we want to have. We want to try and encourage it as much as we can.
Yep, point taken. We'll do what we can to make it as competitive and support the drivers to uptake electric.
Thank you very much. Councillor Sanders.
Thanks, Claire. Hayley and Nikki, have the taxi trade told you what their preferences are for the sort of hubs that they want to see and what sort of places they want to see the hubs at?
Yeah, so the preferences really are around where they pick up most work and where they stop for breaks. That's kind of the preference.
Right. Where is that, roughly?
So roughly, we've had a lot of interest for a location near the Hard because, big transport interchange. Quite a bit in North End. Then the next most popular were kind of Southsea Common around the piers, Fratton, Albert Road, Commercial Road, and then we've got like Hillsley industrial areas, Ocean Park, that kind of thing. So yeah, where you would expect really that they're regularly picking people up from.
Okay, sorry Claire, I understand that. It's just if we're only having initially 3 or 4 locations, which is what it is sounding like, then there's a combination of what we would want, and I have some sympathy with what Lee's been saying, which is basically somewhere off the island, possibly Cosham Shopping Centre, possibly QA, somewhere near railway stations, somewhere near key hubs. So I think, that we can give a steer, but if the taxi trade, and Scott's point, if the taxi trade ain't happy with the steer we're giving them, then it's got to be, if there's only 3 or 4, then you've got to focus on where they want to go first. And so Claire, I would suggest it would be really helpful if we get a rough idea from the cabbies of the sort of areas they'd want prioritised first. So within all that, do they want to go to the Hard first? Do they want to go to Cosham first? Do they want to go to St Mary's first? Do they want to go down by the King's Theatre first? That, I think, would be really helpful if we have to prioritise for 3 or 4. I'm happy with all these locations, but, if we're only getting 3 or 4 in the first instance, we really need to know from them what that 3 or 4 is. We may have our own preferences, which is great, but we really need to know from them what the 3 or 4 is, and then work ideally with Claire and with Scott to see how we can marry the 2 up. That would be my suggestion, but I'll go with what colleagues suggest.
Thank you, Councillor Sanders. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Hayley, for bringing the report to us today. I've actually got 2 questions, if I may. The first one, sorry for not turning around to face you because the microphone's in front. The proposed rapid charging points when they go in, are they proposed to be for the exclusive use of licensed vehicles, or would private residents who own vehicles be allowed to use them as well? And I suppose if they are intended to be for licensed vehicles, is there any way of regulating and making sure they have priority to actually use them and get the benefits of them? And the second, not entirely related question, looking at the map, there are 20 proposed sites on there. I'm assuming there'll be some sort of framework or criteria to find the right 3 or 4 for the first set. Is there any plan to seek future funding to find additional sites that are also good sites? Because if we get 3 of these, that's 17 potentially good sites that we won't be able to get in the first tranche. Would we be looking for additional funding to have more installed in the future?
Okay, so your first question about use, who can use them, initially we would aim for taxi and private hire only, and we can limit use through giving out a smart card just to members of the trade, so only they could access them. I think there's a decision to make about whether that's limited to those licensed in Portsmouth only, or whether we extend it further. What I would say is we have already had some correspondence from drivers who are residents of the city but licensed elsewhere, who have said, I've got an electric vehicle, where can I charge it? So there is demand there. Just to give you a bit of context, we've currently only got about 6 plug-in electric or hybrid vehicles actually licensed with Portsmouth. So there are only 6 vehicles that we've got licensed that would be making use of this initially. But we know there are a lot that operate in the city that aren't licensed here. So yeah, that's that point. And then, sorry, the second point
was around seeking future funding for additional sites.
Sorry, yes. Yeah, we're always looking out for funding, definitely. So yeah, this would be a first tranche. Any opportunities, we're constantly looking out. So for example, with the on-street charge points, we're currently preparing a bid for the third tranche of that. So yeah, any money, we're always on the lookout.
That's great, thanks very much.
Thank you. Councillor Mason.
Thank you very much. Just really having a second bite of the cherry. I think, is there any possibility that those areas that are more commercially advantageous with who as well might attract a commercial supplier, either one of the energy suppliers or one of our BP, Shell, etc., who might be willing to put in a petrol station? And I would contrary the argument saying it does need to be infrastructure across the whole city, so I do worry that they might be trying to be snaffled away in sort of Lib Dem yellow areas in the south. I think we do need to have one in the north, and I'm going to push again for Waterton Street, purely for the fact it is mainly used by taxi drivers using the toilets there, and bus drivers actually. It's having been caught short when we've been out campaigning, it's always where everyone heads to, and you obviously got to join the queue of taxi drivers trying to get in there, and it is quite close to the train station as well, which is one of the main hubs, so thank you.
Yeah, completely agree. We do need that big spread, and it needs to be based on need and demand and nothing else, yeah.
And the possibility for having commercial...
Yeah, that's a really good point. There are lots of grants available if people want to put them in on private land. So, for example, if any of the operators wanted to put them at their offices, there are grants available for them to do that, and we're happy to work with them to support them to do that. And yes, there's a big bit of work that industry needs to do to fund these themselves. We held a conference here last week actually about how to get to net zero, and there was a talk from central government, and one of their key takeaway points was actually private industry need to be driving this. Local authorities have been driving the infrastructure delivery so far for EV, and it's private companies' turn to do it, so you're absolutely right.
Yep.
For you, Chairman, would it be possible that we could send out the details, compile the details about the private grants that are available and send them out to all the registered operatives in the city?
Yeah, no problem at all. I'll put that together.
Councillor Sanders.
Sorry, it's just following on from Lee's point. Hayley, it might be useful when we've got big commercial developments coming through, so big planning developments coming through, particularly in the city centre, to see whether they could make a contribution towards this, because I mean, if we knew this was coming, then for instance the recent student development that had been passed through by the planning committee, I'm pretty sure would have asked very nicely for money to install for taxis in Guildhall Walk or in the city centre, which is where I think the biggest contribution, the biggest cluster of this is the city centre and Portsea. And I think it would be useful to see whether we can get any big developments to contribute to that, because otherwise we'll be scrambling around for grants which may or may not happen or may not exist because of the cuts in the spending review. But then again, money from planners may be quite useful.
Yeah, completely agree. I know colleagues in planning and transport planning are working on updating the parking standards at the moment, and as part of that they are setting out requirements for developers' contributions for things like electric vehicles and car clubs as well. So yeah, that's certainly on our radar to do that.
Thank you, Councillor Peter Harris.
Chair, may I make a suggestion? We've got the Appendix A, which has got a early locations shortlist and draft. I think it would be a good idea to condense that list down, and then we can focus on the locations that the taxi drivers actually want. And I think as a caveat to that, I think Councillor Mason's right. We should be looking to have at least one of these points off the island, because I think it's important. I know, Chair, you don't think Cosham's in Portsmouth, but it is. But I think it's quite important, actually, that that should be part of the, well, not the recommendation, but the licensing committee notes that we believe that that should happen. And I don't want to feel like we're letting those residents down either. So I think that would be what I would like to see happen going forward, and I hope members agree.
Absolutely, I think, yeah, was it Witten Street, did you say it was? So I think that's a fantastic idea, being right next to the public toilets and somewhere where people can go and grab a tea or coffee, being so close to the shops especially. I think that should be, I know we can't make any decisions, but we can certainly make some very good points towards Ms. Chowers today, but I think that should be mainly agreed, nodded through from all of us, that that is a very good place to think of, number one, especially. I also thought to myself that maybe the Hard, obviously, is that place to put other ones. When I read the tiny map that you kind of had to zoom into if you're looking online, I thought, I don't know where you could put them in Albert Road, but I thought maybe Albert Road might have been a suggestion, but like public car park wise, there probably isn't anywhere you can put them, but I thought Albert Road and then trying to figure somewhere else. For only 10 at the moment, is there any other provision for more to go in as soon as you can, or is it dependent on funding?
Yeah, at present, completely dependent on funding. So yeah, as more sources arise, we will, I guess we can come back with more suggestions as we find some more money.
Thank you for that. Councillor Weems.
I just wanted to know if you have the figures on how much the technical and economic feasibility study may be, or whether that would be incorporated into the cost by the contractor.
Yeah, I don't have the breakdown of that, I'm afraid, but I can certainly get that for you. That's not a problem.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? I think we're doing a hybrid of them at the moment. Councillor Peter Harris.
If I may, Chair, it's just I'm going through the exhaustive list, and yeah, I'm just looking at, there's some people have mentioned the North End taxi rank, but there isn't actually a North End taxi rank at the moment. There was one previously on Derby Road, but that was taken away. Yeah, it's now gone, and I get constant emails from a trade rep who tells me it's gone, and if I don't raise it now in this meeting, he'll probably send us another email saying it hasn't been raised. So I'm raising it now just to make a note of that taxi rank is not in play, and also I think to feed into this also would be the use of bus lanes for private hire vehicles. I think it's a discussion that this committee should have, so I hope we can give an undertaking that will come from traffic and transportation soon.
Of course, there's been a bit of discussion. I don't want to put Nikki under any pressure, but I think she's getting ready to say something. So, Nikki, hello.
Just to reassure members that the two issues that Councillor Peter Harris has just raised are in officers' hands, and they are currently being dealt with as we speak. So yes, there is engagement between our services for taxis in private hires in bus lanes, and yes, we are looking at identifying the issues in London Road for the provision of a taxi rank.
I'm going to be slightly facetious, Nikki, and apologies, but I know this is not down to yourself, but these issues have been in officers' hands for a long time, and I think it's time that these things were pushed on, especially with regards to the taxi ranks, and especially with regards to bus lanes review. Because I had a meeting about 4 months ago, and it hasn't moved forward since then, and I was told something imminent. I know things take a long time in this place, but I just think it needs to happen, and we need to have that discussion, and I don't know what is holding it up. So apologies, I know I can sense...
Our hands are tied. From a licensing authority, my hands are tied.
I know.
The recommendations that you made were advertised in line with the legislation, so the approval is there. It's just down to the...
Yeah, I'm going to make the distinction quite quickly. If it was a cycle lane, it'd be done very quickly. it's not being done very quickly, and I think that is what gets up the driver's nose. And that's all I'm going to say.
In a follow-up to that, I'd really like to request another full licensing meeting before, I want to say mid-December at the very latest, and to get somewhere with it. And it's even if we're forcing other departments to kick their heels into gear, I'd really like that, because it has taken a while. And I think maybe when we were talking about the livery over last year, that the taxi lane, the bus lanes discussion did come into it, and so I'd really like for us to have full licensing committee and do something there. I'm sorry to force you into it, but I think we've got to force a lot of other people into it anymore, and if we put a date down for a meeting, then it's going to do that.
Members, obviously, I'm working at the moment on the new vehicle standards or licensing standards, and it was our intention to get a report to you this year to look at the new recommendations and how the statutory guidance could guide and amend your policy. So yes, mid-December is a perfect opportunity for us to get those things to you.
Thank you. Councillor Mason.
I'd just like to second your proposal for that we do have a...
Did I propose something? Are we allowed to propose? And we're not allowed to make a decision, but I can heavily say
I know,
that
I
I'd
think
like
we
that.
can make a decision because we are in public, so...
This is,
we haven't got a legal it. So.
I'm looking to Democratic Services, but my understanding is that although you are sitting as a licensing committee, you're sitting in terms of this briefing paper, I'm happy to give an assurance to members sitting here today and all licensing committee members that the wishes of the chair and yourselves are going to be met, and we can perhaps identify that date next week. Chair, if that's convenient.
That'd be very convenient, grateful, thank you.
And I think if we summons the relevant directors into our meeting, if they haven't made progress or their officers haven't made progress, I think the buck needs to stop at the top. So the directors of those teams need to come here and answer why it hasn't progressed.
Thank you very much. Councillor Petty-Harris.
I think Councillor Mason's 100% right about that, and obviously understanding orders can be reflected in the minutes of what Councillor Mason has just said, because I think it's important.
Thank you. Councillor Sellers?
Just coming back to what I think the committee, I may be wrong, guys, but I think the committee wants to give a steer to the officers as to where we should prioritise these locations. Is that reasonable? Scott?
I think it's more of a condensing down the list and ensuring that we're working with the drivers.
Yeah, that's fine.
Not the officers. I think
working with the taxi drivers, but I think our preferences are, tell me if I'm wrong, guys, is one, somewhere off the island, brackets, Gosham. Two, hospitals.
If there's only 10, but I would suggest one at QA Hospital. Where can we put it? Is it not?
I'm trying to think of general steers as opposed to specific sites.
There's not a city council owned car park near the hospital. We could try and I'm happy to make contact with hospital afterwards, but I think the officers do as well. They're doing a new development for a car park. It might be a good idea. They should include one themselves. Especially since they're tapping us for seal money at the moment, they could include a car park charge in their own car park.
Are they asking you for seal? Can I just come back to Hayley, just a point up for that, and then I'll come to you, Councillor Brown, more about QA, so and private land especially. Could does the funding only count for public land for City Council and not whether we can fund in private land?
Yeah, it does need to be on, PCC land or on the highway, so it's publicly accessible. I'm not sure about the hospital actually, because that's kind of, public land-ish, isn't it? Although it's not ours. I can ask the question about that. I can let you know.
The other bits that I want to try and get a consensus on were railway stations. Maybe. And I do think somewhere in Southsea, and I think Ashby Place car park ain't a bad shout, but we might go somewhere else. So to me, it's somewhere off the island as number one, 2 hospitals, 3 major shopping centres, and 4 anything else anyone wants to add. And that would be my preference in that order.
I'm glad to say that Wotton Street is within 4 minutes walk of a train station at Gosham and the shopping centre, so it's really a thing. Ashby Place is actually quite a good idea, because whilst it's lesser known, it'll be more the taxi drivers getting into the use it rather than just random people finding it. So
I'm trying to avoid specific places, because I mean Scott's point about and my point about working with the cabbies is really important, I think. But I would go with that general steer to Nikki and Hayley, and I can't propose it, but I'm.
No, thank you.
If people are unhappy with it, yell.
Thank you. Councillor Ballon, I'll come back because I've thought of another one.
Thank you. Hayley, perhaps you can just clarify. My understanding was that we're not looking at 10 different sites, we're looking at 10 chargers, and that each individual site will have a cluster of either 3 or 4. So in reality, we're dividing that 10 into 3 sites? Or 3 or 4 sites for the initial tranche, yeah. I mean, if we just said we have 2 at each one, we can end up having 5 sites in pairs, but then you're limited to the number of cabbies who can charge up at each one at any given time.
Yeah, that's right. So they'll be clustered together. It just helps us deliver it a bit more cost effectively, and yeah, it will save time by putting them in basically in the same location, and the end result is it's probably better for the drivers so they don't have that frustration of turning up and finding somebody else plugged in.
Thank you. I don't know if members would agree, but maybe round the back of the fleet, because obviously it's a very popular place at the weekends where we have a lot of taxis going in and out all the time. I don't know if that would be an idea for a suggestion around there. Trying to think if, like I said, the public toilets thing, because obviously you are waiting around for taxis to be charged up. So I would like it in line with maybe some facilities here and there, but maybe, I don't know, if taxi drivers are able to walk into a pub and just quickly use the toilet in there. But Guildhall Walk is obviously a very popular venue at the weekends, and everyone just seems to be getting taxis there. Members, any other suggestions for places that you think would be very valuable that we can suggest to the trade? Also, Hayley, I just wanted to say, so is this going to Cabinet, but you make the final decision over the points?
Yeah, it's going to Cabinet. Yeah, I wouldn't say we make the decision. We will have to be, there are constraints basically. So in some locations, I know the National Grid will say, no, you haven't got capacity to put them in there. So that'll be one thing. There might be some really good locations that we just cannot do because the electricity won't support it. And yeah, some of it we might not get approval for the people who operate the site to use it. So yes, it's all PCC land, but we would need to get approval from the directorate that operate it, because some might have concerns about lost income and things like that. So yeah.
What's our time frame on the decision? Their decision?
We're hoping to take a paper to Cabinet next month, because I would like to try and get one in this side of Christmas, if we can, with the rest coming next year, because I just want to get them in.
Thank you very much. Members, any other questions or comments? Suggestions? Well, I note this, thank you, and I really hope that we do get the best place, and thank you for these electric charging points. Members, hopefully we'll be meeting again before the mid-December. If you have issues that you'd like to be brought onto the agenda for licensing, please contact myself, Scott or Nikki, and we see if we can put it onto the meeting, but I feel like that meeting might be very, very long, so because we haven't met properly in a long time, there's a lot of issues we need to iron out. Thank you everyone, and that concludes today's meeting. Have a lovely weekend.